Okay, so this particular question is concerning fear, and they want to know if fear is always sinful. And I think I need to kind of read the whole thing, even though it's kind of long, just to get some context of what they're asking. And so the question is fear always sinful? Recently, I was in a situation where I was very concerned about the safety of my young child and was fearful of something happening. I tried to not let the fear consume me, so I kept silent and prayed. The situation came to a head where I thought if something didn't change right now, then my child would be in a lot of danger. So I yelled out of my concern, and it was more of a yell like a "stop, there's a car coming," not a yell of "how dare you." Thankfully, everything ended up in turning out fine. However, they've received some backlash as if their yell was taken out of a lack of trust. And so is all fear a sinful reaction? Is there usually as Christians, when we talk about the fear of God, we're talking about a reverence. But is there any reasonable situation where I'd want to be in fear?
Sure, if you're about to fall off a cliff, if you're about to if you're going to be attacked by a dog, if you're going to, God's given us fear specifically for protection. Specifically, like with the animals, after the animals got off the ark, God gave them a fear of humans. And part of the reason for that is because now they're food. So before the flood, what God provided for mankind to eat was vegetables. And it doesn't mean that they always did that, but that's what God provided. And it wasn't until after the flood that God allowed mankind to eat meat. And so consequently, what he did was he put a fear of mankind into the animals, and so that's to protect them. So you can't just walk up on a bunny and club it. The rabbit's going to try to get away from you. And so fear is designed as a self-defense type of situation, and there's nothing wrong with that. Fear is also designed in the sense of having a concern for others. And so I used to be in construction and used to do a lot of just high work. And nowadays OSHA's got in and you rope off for everything. Back when I started construction, you didn't. And so I would walk a beam over a 2 or 3 story building and work off it and that kind of thing without being tied off. And so when I first started, there was a fear in the sense that I wasn't stable and I could have fallen off. I remember the first time I walked an 8-foot wall, and back then we were framing with 2x4s, so it's a 2x4 wall. And so but within a week I'm running on an 8-foot wall, and so that's a natural fear, and there's nothing wrong with that. On the other hand, I was also a contractor, and when guys would be doing high work, I would be watching them, and if they were doing things that made me think they were going to fall off, then I'd be yelling at them and tell them to watch themselves and that kind of thing, because you can get hurt. And so there's a fear that comes from a concern for other people, and I think I don't think that. I know that that's something that God's designed within us. One of the things with your email though is towards the end it says if not, what's the difference between sinful fear and appropriate fear? If my husband and I don't see eye to eye on the danger of a situation, does that mean my fear or concern are void? And so this is what I want to talk to you about, because that kind of clues me in on some of the stuff that's going on here. Having a fear for your kids is totally valid. You need to watch out for them. Little children do dumb things. I've seen kids run out in front of cars and that kind of thing. And so I try to instill in my children and now my grandchildren a fear of the road. And so I don't want them to go out on the road. My dog goes out and likes to sit on the road, and I try to instill a fear of the road on him too. And it's because I want to protect him. But one of the things that can happen between a husband and a wife is wives are momming, and there's nothing wrong with being a mom, and there's nothing wrong with being radically concerned with your child, but there's a balance there between you and your husband. And so one of the things that you have to watch out for is that you're not disrespecting your husband out of fear for your child. And I'm not privy to everything that's gone on, and maybe your husband is a total and complete idiot and does stupid things all the time. I doubt that you would probably say that to me. I hope that you wouldn't say that to me, but maybe he is, and that's why you're so fearful about the whole thing. The reaction that you got was probably not a reaction necessarily about your fear. It's about your lack of trust with your husband, and so that's going to be the issue there. And so there have been things that I've allowed my kids to do, my boy specifically to do, that my wife was fearful of. And the guy's a boy. My son is a boy. He needs to be a boy, and he needs to do things that boys do. And otherwise, he's going to be a girly man. And so there were times when I overruled my wife. And I told her, you need to be silent about this and not say a word. Don't say anything. And some of that had to do with the way that I would treat my boy. I'll just give you an example. Came back from football practice, and he was having an attitude towards the coaches, and he had some right to do that, but he was out of line. And so I told Bobby to get out of the car when we got home. I said, get out of the car. And she was like, well, doing one of those things. I said, no, get out of the car. I want you to leave. I need to talk to him. And so she did that, and she didn't want to. She went in. She sat in our house looking out the window at me and my son in the car. And so we had a conversation about being a man and doing the right things and treating your coaches with respect. And he was crying. And he should have been crying because I was getting on him. And then afterwards, we went out into the front yard, and I spent some time with him doing lineman work. And so I was showing him how to hit. And so I wasn't being mean to him. I wasn't hurting him, and that kind of thing. What I was doing was manning him up. Otherwise, he was going to have an even harder time when he went back to school. And my wife didn't like any of it. She would tell you this. She didn't like any of it. But afterwards, she saw fruit that came from that because of Nathan's attitude. My son loves me. And because of his attitude towards me, and his attitude changed as far as practice went, and all of that kind of stuff. And so if you've got a situation here where you're not trusting your husband, you need to figure out if that's him or if that's you. And if it's him, then you need to have, and you might want to talk to somebody else, maybe your dad, about this, and find out if your husband's being way out of line in some situation. I mean, for all I know, your husband could be, having a kid hang from a zip line that's 50 feet up, without being tied off. Yeah, I wouldn't do that with my kid, right? And so, but you need to see if your expectations are reasonable, or if your husband's expectations in the situation are unreasonable, and then you gotta let the guy parent. You're not the only parent, and so you have to let him parent, and especially when you're talking about boys, you gotta let him parent. There are times when a guy knows what to do with a boy, and a lady does not. Routinely, as my son was growing up, my wife would look over at me, and she would have a questioning look on her face because my son's doing something off the wall, and she'd look at me, and I'd just shake my head, yeah. And it's like I'm telling her, yeah, that's what boys do, And she grew up with girls and didn't have any brothers, and so there's some of that going on, and so I would just counsel you to make sure that this is not a lack of respect for your husband. If it's a lack of respect for your husband, that's either warranted or it's not warranted. But the scripture says that you're supposed to respect your husband. And so as much as you can without violating what God says in a situation, you need to give your husband the respect that's due to him, and you'll find that your relationship with him gets a whole lot better. And he is the child's other parent. And so if he's the parent, then it's like you don't want to parent your kid alone. Otherwise, you maybe can't pay. I've seen situations where people got so heated over this kind of stuff that they ended up parenting alone because they ended up having real problems in their marriage and maybe ending up in divorce and things like that. I'm not saying that that's where you're going, but you get my meaning here. And so you want your husband to be involved in the situation. And again, I don't have enough information to know exactly what's going on. But I know that the reaction that you got from your husband, it looks like, didn't have so much to do with your fearfulness as with your lack of trust in him. And that may be warranted or not warranted. And again, you need to figure that out. So,
okay, a couple things with that. She makes if this is a her, I don't know if it is, but there's a statement here that says, when the disciples thought that Jesus was a ghost, they yelled out, and to me, Jesus seemed to comfort them and ease their fears. Do you think that he was doing more of a comfort type thing or more of a rebuke thing? Because, like when Peter gets on the boat and Jesus said, why did you doubt? That seems to be a little bit more of a...
Well, yeah.
A rebuke or when he calms the storm.
The first thing that happens is he comes walking on the water and all the disciples go, it's a ghost. And he goes, it's me.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So that's comforting.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
It's really me, and I happen to be walking on water. When he appears to them in the upper room, it's me. Come here and see. You can handle me and see. You got any food here? And he does the whole thing with eating fish and honeycomb. And so there's a comfort aspect to that. And again, if some spooky thing appeared in the middle of the room, like right now, there would be a natural fear that would come with that. If it's the Lord himself, the fear would go away as soon as I realized it's the Lord or of the Lord. Could be an angel, but when men saw angels, they fell flat. Mm-hmm. And so you have that. And the angels always comforted them. And so right. The point's well taken there. And so you can see that. So, but again, when you're looking at situations like this, moms have a tendency to overcompensate with their kids as far as protecting them. Dads can have a tendency to, if they're young and not wise. I'm really glad I raised my kids when I was older, because I probably would have done some not wise things with my kids, and had to learn the lesson. As it was, that didn't really happen to me.
With that whole deal of Jesus comforting people, is there an element in there where the husband can comfort his wife or not comfort her and kind of help in that situation of fear? Well, sure, it can, but generally speaking, what happens is it's an incident like what's being spoken about here. There's something happening. There's a car coming. Apparently, they're playing in the road. Right.
So I can't tell you how many times I played in the road.
Well, yeah, and that was going to be another question I had.
Not the freeway.
In the situation that you are explaining, you have a woman who has these fears, and then you have a dad that kind of brings reality to it. There are times where I counsel moms of boys, and I have to encourage the mom. Yeah. Listen, boys fall out of trees.
Right.
Listen,
things
boys.
break.
But boys play football. So, is there anything to a single mom that you might encourage who's raising boys?
If I was a single mom and I was raising boys, a lot of times what single moms want to do is find some guy that will be a mentor in the boy's life. And if you've got somebody like that, a brother or your dad, his grandpa, something like that, that's always a blessing. If you don't have that, then you need to get some information. You need to talk to a guy that you trust, without, necessarily demanding that he come and hang out with your kid. But talk to a guy that you trust and say, is this normal? I would be getting information. My mom didn't want me to play football. We were, at the time that was going on, we were way past, we had a messed up family. And so, I wasn't listening to my mom. So she didn't want me to play football, and I just went and bought cleats and played anyway. She probably would have freaked out if she saw me pole vaulting. I used to pole vault. And then, that can get pretty dangerous, especially when you're learning. And, she would have freaked out about that too. And here I am, played football, pole vaulted, wrestled, did all this stuff, and I'm still here alive. And, years later, my mom asked me, because I have knee issues from football. She asked me, so are you sorry you played football? Every time my knee hurts, I just remember how fun it was. There are things that are worth it. And so, again, with this, I wouldn't necessarily be looking at the fear. Concern for another person is completely valid. When your concern goes beyond what God would have in the situation, that's when it becomes a problem. So I could be concerned about falling off a bridge. If that keeps me from going across bridges, then there's a problem, because I have to be able to go and do the things that God wants me to do.
Well, and that was going to lead to my final question. Let's say you've got, a teenage girl, a young woman, 20s. She works out at the mall. She gets off at 10 o'clock at night, and she has this fear of going out to her car into a, like an empty parking lot. It's dark and all of that. Is that a healthy fear?
Yes.
And then... Is there right. So, but I was just going to have you expound on it. And then also, is there a time where that fear becomes consuming?
Right. And yes, that's a healthy fear. You're going out in a dark parking lot, and we live in a real world where girls can't beat up guys, no matter what the TV or the movies show you. And so it's amazing how strong in comparison to a woman a small man is. It's amazing. And so men are built differently, and so we live in a culture that's messed up on all kinds of levels. And so a bright flashlight and pepper spray and things like that. And if you're going out into a parking lot and it's iffy at all, yes, these are things that I would give to my daughter. And so that kind of stuff. On the other hand, God is with us. We follow Jesus. God's with us. He's going to take care of me. I need not be stupid, but he's going to take care of me. And so I can't let that fear cripple me. And the Bible says perfect love casts out fear. And so the way you get past a fearful situation, you got some people who huddle up in their houses and never come out because they're afraid of everything. And the way that you get past those things is you stop thinking about the fearful issue, the thing that's causing your fear, and you start thinking about the will of God in your life. What does God want you to do? And so, a lady that's afraid of mice will stand in between a rabid dog and her child. And so that's because she loves her child more than she loves herself. And so you can overcome fear by a love for the Lord and by a love for the people who are around you. I literally had a lady who was afraid to go across bridges. And I go, why you got to cross a bridge? Well, there's a grocery store that I got to go to. Who you getting the groceries for? Well, my family. Is it just you that you're getting the groceries for? Well, no. It's your children, it's your, and so I said, what you do is when you're having to cross the bridge, you start thinking about the fact that this, you're the wife, you're the one who's doing the food for your family, you are taking care of your children, you're taking care of your husband, and you need to be crossing the bridge not because of you, but because of them. And you start focusing on your love for your family and your love for God and the fact that you want to do God's will in this situation. And that's how you overcome fear.
Yeah, and then you have the inevitable situation where that fear comes to fruition. Something happens to the bridge.
Yeah.
And then it's like, I told you, I'm never going to do it again.
So have you ever crossed a bridge and it fell apart?
No.
Okay.
No, but you know what I mean, though? It's like that fear becomes reality. And
What you do, what people like that do is they see a bridge that's falling apart on TV. And they go, see?
Yeah, right. Yeah. That's exactly what happens. Yeah. Happened to someone else. And they're like, yeah. And so, that's one of the things I tell people too is, okay, so what if it does?
Yeah.
Prepare for the worst, right? Yeah. But I'm not going to let there.
Yeah, you don't sit there and decide that the worst thing is going to happen every single day. Mm-hmm. And so.
But even if it does.
Yeah. I can walk outside and a rock from heaven can fall down and hit me in the head.
Yeah.
It's like, okay. Immediately into the presence of God.